Hello and welcome back to another episode of Transport Fever 2. We're here in Brookshire County, just outside of Pittsburgh, coming in on our new train line that we put in the last video. And in this episode, we're going to slowly start getting the new machines line up and running. And we're also going to fix up some of our cities that have started to grow a little bit more wildly without our supervision. And so, just to recap the end of the last video, we set up everything that we need in order to supply this machines factory here just outside of Pittsburgh. And I think in this video, we're going to set up the steel side of the machines factory. So we have some iron ore mines that we placed up here on top of this little plateau area. And then we have some coal mines over here on the edge of the map that we're also going to connect up to this steel mill. Now, the tricky thing is going to be figuring out how we want to get those resources in here, but that's part of why we're only doing half of it in this video, since machines does take a lot of resources. It would be a lot to cram all that into one video, so I really want to focus on getting these mines going and connected to the steel mill, and then also connecting the steel mill to the machines factory. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go through and begin to build out some of our cities, much similarly how we did in Pittsburgh here. We have the little bit of a beginnings of building here, which we did just get a commercial building pop up on the other side of the river, so that's exciting to see. And then we have space over here for an industrial area once the city starts to expand out this way. And we're pretty much going to try to have something like this in every city. We'll have a couple of empty blocks sort of planned out for the city to grow into. The reason we didn't get to that too much before was just because our money and redoing the road grids in some cities was very expensive. But now that we're consistently making a decent amount of money, doing this shouldn't be much of an issue. And so let's waste no time getting into this. And we'll start here by fitting out our steel mill, just so we can figure out how we're going to be coming into this area, sort of the angle and elevation that we'll be doing it at. And then once we have the steel mill set up, we can go and detail the mines and connect those up. And now thinking about how we're going to have our resources come in here, I think we're going to do it by train. By train would be pretty easy to get out of this coal mine area. And then I think I have a solution here for getting the iron ore down through such a large elevation change, but we'll cover that when we get there. So I kind of like having this straight road here be a nice guide. So we'll delete this road and we'll rebuild this one straight, and then that gives us the perfect road to have our cargo train terminal sit. So we can just come in here and grab one of these cargo stations, and we'll make this pretty long because we'll probably be having some pretty long trains coming through here. And this seems to have lined up pretty well with how we want it. We'll just get that placed along the road here, and then I think we're going to replace this steel mill somewhere a little bit better. And actually, what I think we're going to do is we're going to try out this Freestyle Industries mod for this steel mill. This pretty much allows us to place sort of an invisible industry. You can sort of see here what I mean by that. And then we can essentially detail it however we want. So I think we'll clear this area out. We'll go over how this works and get that placed, and then that gives us the freedom to pretty much fill up this whole riverside exactly how we want for the look of this steel mill. Alright, so now this whole area should be pretty much perfectly flat. So we'll come in here, we'll go into our Industries tab, and we'll want to find the one that we want. And so the one we want is this Freestyle Industry 3. This gives us the option to have 2 inputs equal an output, which is how the steel mill works. We can adjust this however we want. So we might come back and do some tweaking with this. I don't think we'll mess with number of employees, so we'll just leave that at 0. We'll set our production to 100 for now. Of course, we can change that through all of this stuff, but I believe how the steel mill normally works is 2 iron ore, 2 coal equals 1 steel, and we'll stick with that for now. Again, we can come it through and adjust it later if we feel that it could be different or if things should change there. And we'll just perfectly offset this from our train station. Now we can change the size of this, and this is really sort of the stockyard. I believe this is the area that will populate with resources as they come and go. So we can just come in here. I think this is probably a good enough size. We'll place that down, and now when we zoom out, you can see it pretty much functions the exact same as a normal steel industry would. And so we'll get into detailing all this. We'll go into placing all the buildings around, making it look functional. We're going to add a port over here so that we can eventually ship this steel down the river to the machines factory. And then we'll be back after we have all that set up. Alright, and so I think this is a very good starting point for our steel mill. We left ourselves plenty of room to grow. I didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, as we'll want to upgrade this over time, and I want to make sure everything functions correctly before we really get into the small details. And so with this being done for now, let's head over to, I guess we'll start off with our coal mines, and let's get those started. So now again, it's really about figuring out where we want our train station to be, and then we'll go from there. And we sort of have two options here. Now we did place these industries, so they don't necessarily have to stay there, because I think right about here is a pretty good spot for a train station. However, it seems to be a little bit more hilly than I thought it was here. We might just have to find a good spot and then cover it up pretty well with some terraforming. But I think if we lower this into the terrain a little bit, we can even out our costs to about there. That's lined up pretty well with the sort of exit of this mountainous area. And then we'll first delete this as well, and then we'll just even up the terrain a bit, and then once things are detailed, we can come back through and start to roughen it up a little bit. And so we'll start with this sort of landscape here. First we'll want to get this road placed, so we'll try to get this pretty well lined up with our train station here. Actually, this is the perfect time to configure this to have more storage, since this will probably be a pretty heavily used train station. We want to make sure it has adequate storage for all of the coal that's going to come through here. So now that we've done that, we should be able to get a road placed right out front like so, and we can now begin to use this as the base for where our other industries get placed. And so this is how we're going to start out here with our two coal industries, our train station, and our one road. So let's get into detailing this area, and hopefully as we go through that, we'll figure out how these are going to connect up to the train station, and then figure out how we're going to blend this into the area. Alright, and so this seems good enough for the coal mines. Again, I don't want to get into too much of the nitty-gritty of the area at the moment. Once we finish up the machines line, we'll come back through and really add the finishing touches to all these places, but getting us just sort of started with the surrounding landscape, I think gives us a pretty good head start, as we get into this very lengthy process of detailing the machine's line. And so lastly, we have our iron ore mines here. And as for the detailing with it, with just how the main base industry looks, I kind of like the idea of having a bunch of these sort of stacked next to each other, since they already sort of have a somewhat unnatural looking form. I think if we sort of cluster a group of them together, it could look pretty decent. So we'll try that out. We will get a train station connected, and then hopefully once we're done with all that, we can start to connect things up. Alright, and so unfortunately this is all that we're able to do with the iron ore mine at the moment, but I think this does look pretty good, and if we sort of start to replicate this, maybe another set here, and then we can start to expand over here, I think this could still look pretty good, but we'll just roll with this for now. And I think next step is connecting the train tracks to the steel mill, and then I'm not sure if we can start delivering these raw goods to the steel mill without there being an end product, but we'll try it out anyway. If it does prove to not really go anywhere, we can just get rid of those vehicles and wait until we have the rest of the machine line up and running. And so let's start with what I hope will be our easier line to connect up, the coal end of it. So, of course, it seems like we'll be sort of fighting our money for a little bit until we sort of get financially set again. But hopefully, based on previous videos, we should start to get this money coming in pretty quickly now that we're not spending a whole bunch of it on all the terraforming that we were doing. Alright, and so now, after nothing too crazy or expensive, we were able to get ourselves from the coal mine down to the steel mill. The most challenging part was definitely probably here, getting out of these mountains. We have a few tunnels and the bridge, but those didn't end up costing too much because they weren't terribly long. And then we come down to the river, where then we tunnel through this hill and then pop out right back where the steel mill is. Now next we can focus on connecting our iron ore mine, and that's going to come from this station here. Hopefully it can come down this hill at a not too terrible slope that it can at least stick to the terrain for, and then we'll come and connect somewhere in this area where then that can also head into the steel mill. Alright, now finally we have our connection to the iron mine set up. Now we had to do a very aggressive slope to work our way down and around without it costing a fortune, but we were able to get it to work, and hopefully soon, once we get our trains rolling, we can have something that can handle this slope in a reasonable manner. And so with that, let's get our trains set up. We'll just have them come out right here by the steel mill. I believe we can just simply have this snap onto the end there. And we will need to set up signals. And once that's done, we can come back and build our trains for these lines. Alright, and now with our signals placed, let's build a train and see if this works delivering goods before we can get the finished product out. Alright, so the first train that we're going to go with is our iron ore train, and I downloaded this Climax locomotive because it is a geared engine, I believe pretty much designed to go up steep slopes like this. So you can see under its power rating, it has pretty much almost no issue going up a high slope and being able to accelerate and get to its top speed very quickly for that. Now the trade-off for all this power is the top speed, but we are pretty early in the steam era, so we are limited by our wagons anyway, as that top speed is 31. So hopefully there won't be too much of a disconnect between this one and the coal train, so those shouldn't hold up each other. But we'll start off with this one. We'll set this up on a new line running from the iron ore mine down to the steel mill. So now here is that little train here. Hopefully we'll watch it go up the hill and have it bring back a full load of iron. So hopefully that will make us money. The top speed and the windiness of this has me a little worried that we might not be able to make our money back on this line. So that's just something we might have to keep an eye out. We might have to make this train even longer in order to cover its expenses, but we'll be back once this train starts bringing iron ore back to the steel mill. Alright, so now this train is bringing back its first load of iron, and we can already see it's not very promising with this train. I think we're going to have to definitely extend the length of this. Let's come in here and we'll edit this. Now actually, looking at this edit menu, we did just pass 1890, and that unlocked us the Shay locomotive, which has almost double the power that the Climax has. And so I think if we replace this with a Shay locomotive, and then we come in and we just add a bunch of gondola cars on the end of this, let's maybe get this to 20 cars in total. We can see with about double the capacity, it has just about the same stats. We might make this just a bit longer to cover ourselves off just a bit more. And so we'll modify this for another 3 million on top. And hopefully a train of this length should be able to earn its money back, but we'll just double check and make sure once this one gets back around, and hopefully we'll see good things then. Alright, now coming into the station now is our second load, but this time much larger. Let's see how this one goes. So this one looks a little bit more promising. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be able to make a profit. I just think if we take a look at our rate here, that's about half as much as our capacity. So that means about 2 of these financial periods will go before we earn our money back. And so we'll almost definitely be losing about 1 million every time around from this train. So I don't want to say that this little experiment is dead, but it's not looking too great at the moment. Really our only options are to make this train much longer. We can either try to have a more direct route, which there might be one coming up this way, since we did even out near the end here. We have a little bit of height to work with, but of course that's going to be hard to really manage effectively. But maybe we'll mess around with it. I think we'll just sort of stop this train, and we'll solve it sometime soon when we get the machines line set up. But I think we'll leave this for now. Maybe between now and when we get things fully operational, we'll have a more powerful engine at our disposal, or maybe we already do have one and we just haven't seen it yet. But I think we're going to stop this and sell it. Now we did lose some money just from running that little bit, but I think we'll be fine without earning the extra income from this steel mill at the moment. But anyway, we at least have the steel end of our machine's factory line set up. Next video we will work on getting the tools side set up, and depending on how long that takes, we might even get this machines line up and running in the next video. But for now I want to move on to the next thing we want to do, and that's building out our cities as we mentioned at the beginning of the video. We're not going to do all of them, but we will get started on some of the ones that I think need the most attention. And the first one I want to take a look at is Houston. We have a pretty big area set up, and obviously with it being the prime candidate for the capital city of this region, I want to make sure it has that potential. So we're going to pretty much fill out this grid. We might fill out a little bit of this area. We're going to clean up some of these loose ends, and maybe even fill out some of this out by the railroad tracks, and then maybe set up a loose framework on the other side of the river, since it does look like the city is getting ready to build over on this side. And so expanding this should be pretty easy, at least this portion of it. It'll just be extending this medium road. Well, I'm not sure why it's having issues. I think maybe because of this waypoint that's here. So let's first pause. And we'll replace that waypoint somewhere here. Hopefully that doesn't mess up our bus route. Or I don't even know what we were using that for. Let's just double check that we didn't ruin anything. But it looks like everything's working fine there. We can come back to extending this street. And now the trickiest thing is going to be getting this lined up. You can see we already sort of messed up our spacing here, as this is a little bit shorter than this spacing. But there's not too much we can do about that. It looks like we might be able to bring this road this way a little bit. The issue is that none of the streets really snap to anything. So getting a perfectly straight extension is a little unrealistic and very hard to do. But I think just a slight tweak and that might be good. Alright, well, there's no way to tell for good if that is lined up properly, but we'll just continue to keep building out this grid. So we'll extend this road, and we'll pretty much just be filling in this area with a grid. So we'll just do that really quick. And so again, unfortunately, it's not that easy to make a perfect sort of 90-degree grid. So some of these streets might just be a little bit off, but that's really the best that we can do. And I think we'll stick with this for this area. It's a little hard to tell if the grid size is good either, because it looks like we have some big buildings and then the other side sort of gets filled in with these smaller ones. So maybe going with larger units up here. Maybe we do get rid of this street and leave these as larger blocks, and we'll see sort of how that fills in. But I actually kind of like that idea. So we'll perfectly, well, as perfect as we can, sort of divide this space. And that looks about probably as even as we're gonna get, unfortunately, but that should leave us enough room to hopefully have some larger buildings out here. I'm not sure with it being so far away from the city center that we'll necessarily get towers all the way out here, but maybe we'll get these slightly larger footprints. I suppose there is an option to delete some of these grids, and that might help the city fill out more, but we'll leave it and see sort of what happens. So let's move on to the other areas of Houston. Alright, and here's the city grid for Houston. I'm pretty happy with how much we did. We did end up filling in this area and then adding more over here. I'm going to leave this area open. I want to maybe have the city fill in all of this first, but we're going to have to come in here and lock everything. so that the city doesn't come through and automatically build roads and ruin all this. So we're going to quickly go through and do all that, and then once we're done with this, we'll move on to the next city. Alright, and then the next city I want to fix is Salt Lake City quick. So we're going to really just fix this end here and maybe clean up some of the grid. I don't know if we'll do too much expanding because, I mean, the city isn't really growing too fast. And we're going to be destroying a pretty significant portion with all of this. So let's just get into it and hope that we don't accidentally destroy the city along with it. Alright, and now, while it's not perfect, it's definitely a much bigger step in the right direction for Salt Lake City. So, next video, Salt Lake City will be the first one that we fix up when we get to doing the city grids. But now I think it's time to take a look at everything we've done in this video and quickly discuss future projects and upcoming plans. Alright, and so although our steel mill didn't really work out in this video, I have no doubt that we'll come to a solution. I'll mess around between videos, maybe seeing if there's a more efficient route in between here, and maybe mess around with some of our locomotives as well and see if maybe there's an engine that's a little bit better than the Climax. There are opportunities where we can gain a lot more speed on this flat section so that this hill doesn't affect it quite as much, but I'll mess around with that stuff off camera so that I'm not just wasting time. But speaking of the steel mill and everything else in this area, of course, next video we will be setting up this tools factory and then connecting everything to the machines factory. And then after that, we will hopefully begin shipping the machines to Pittsburgh as well as Allentown. And then I think once that's all wrapped up, we'll come back to this tools line that I've been talking about pretty much forever at this point, and we'll get tools supplied to a couple of the cities in this area. And then maybe far, far off in the future, once Houston and Salt Lake City and Portland are requesting more resources, we might even start being able to ship machines all the way over to this end of the map once these cities start requesting those resources. But other than that, that's pretty much it for this video. Unfortunately, we did drain a lot of our money throughout this episode with all the building and the terraforming and detailing. So I'll hopefully build up some money between episodes so we can get right back into it. And unfortunately, we did rack up more of our loan. We went up to 15 million on that just so we could help cover the cost of the train from earlier, as well as building the track and terraforming the landscaping so that it wasn't quite as expensive. But as you can see, we're already starting to earn back some good money. It's just obviously going to take some time to reach our bank account. And so with that, that's going to be all for this video. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.